As Yamani said, I'm a fourth year law student at SLS and creative writer. So I was diagnosed with MDD, which is a severe form of depression, in the year 2017. And this really sparked my interest in, mental health, because I've actually been walking the mental wellness journey and, learning new and innovative ways of coping. So one of those ways has actually been art therapy, which I shall talk about later on. And I must say, at first, I did not think I was well placed to be a part of this panel. And I thought to myself, Magdalene, but you're not even, fully conquered. But then again, I reminded myself of an article I recently wrote. It's called The Audacity. I think it's the one Yamani read. And in one of those lines, I wrote, um, there is barely any prerequisite for the title of being a mental health proactivist. Absolutely no university degree that could scare your skeptical soul away. All you need is a passcode, which I'm happy to share. It is called the Audacity. So coupled with all these things, this is what grounded me to, pursue my goal to help eradicate the stigma that's associated with mental health. Plus, I'm a firm believer in Maya Angelou's quote, which says there's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you. And so, yeah, here I am looking forward to having a great discussion with all of you and sharing our stories, because I know it's in sharing that we shall overcome this mental health hurdle called stigma. Thank you.
Definitely, Magdalene. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Nicole, carpe diem.
So I'll just start with that particular quote. Carpe diem, if we translate it from Latin to English, simply means seize the day. And for me, mental health wasn't always a passion, but from life experiences, from going through a ton of these things myself, I realized a lot of people, and like there's this other bit of scripture for those who are religious that says, a people perish where there's lack of vision or where people don't have knowledge. And I realized many people don't know what this big thing called mental health is. So for that reason, I entirely changed the tangent of my purpose and I inclined it to mental health. So in whatever I do, in the friends I meet, in the way I'm living my life, it's totally surrounded by mental health and trying to encourage people to get a better place or to give information where people are not so sure about what's going on. So for me, it's an acquired passion. I hear people say like an acquired taste. This is an acquired taste in terms of passion. Yes.
Well, that was just spectacular. Thank you so much, Nicole. Mr. Dominic, the floor is yours.
I'm totally impressed by the stories of the two ladies and the motivations behind what they are doing, and it's absolutely fantastic because mine is not comparable to the wonderful experiences and motivations they've got, and that is first of all, more power to you, ladies, and more power to you. I love that. For me, I would say I love teaching. I took after my dad when it comes to education and teaching, and I've always been doing something to do with mentorship since I feel, even when I was in high school. So constantly wanting to see other people flourishing, and so that's what has basically been my motivation. And so after I finished my education degree, I was wondering, okay, do I really want to spend a lot of time only teaching English literature and history in high school? I thought, well, let me shift gears a little bit, and that's how I ended up pursuing psychology. And I find it really fascinating because it helps me to understand people and situations better. And if I can use that knowledge in any way to help people flourish, not only just live, but flourish, that's what I would love to do. And that is why I pursue that. And I am happy to be involved in platforms like this.
Well, thank you so much for that. And audience, this is our lovely panel for this evening. Bunch of diverse individuals, and hopefully we'll learn a lot from them. Air it out that even though we might be strangers to each other in this session, I want us to feel safe. Just know that whatever you say, whether it's a panelist or the audience, if it's a comment, question, don't think about or don't worry about anyone judging you. This is a judge-free zone, and your opinions, your perspectives will be valued 100%. I give you that. So when you speak, feel free and be open. We would really like to encourage that. Thank you so much. Now I guess we can officially start the session. So today's session's theme is towards mental wellness. So I think a simple question I'll ask is, what is mental wellness? Mr. Dominic, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I could comment. I could comment on that. I was very much interested to play the listening part today in a very big way, because I would love to learn from the panelists. But great, I will define mental illness basically in two ways. First of all, it's a lack of or absence of mental illness as a basic, absence of mental illness, absence of depression and loneliness and what have you. But at the same time, presence of goodness, of flourishing. So we are mentioning, so mental well-being is not languishing, and it is flourishing. It's not simply not lacking, therefore. So you can start as a basis of not having a mental illness, but focusing on now on the presence of goodness. And I will distinguish presence of goodness in three ways. There is the presence of truth. Yeah, and here I'm speaking about it in terms of the beliefs you hold, because oftentimes, so what leads to depression is false beliefs. You know, what you believe about life. Like, let's say you believe that you have to be loved by people in order to be happy, or you believe that things have to go your way in order for you to be happy. So these are kind of the beliefs that causes people to, you know, to be quite to have mental illnesses. So the presence of truth, and that means also, you know, being able to speak that. Number two, I would say also the presence of love, in terms of feeling loved and wanted, and also having the capacity to love. Okay, so that, you know, giving and receiving love, that there is presence of that in your own life. And finally, I would put it in terms of hope. And here, hope, I'm talking about positivity. I'm talking about resilience and optimism and a sense of purpose. So that's how you would look generally at what mental wellness is. Yamani?
Thank you so much for that. Magdalene, Nicole, would you like to comment on what Mr. Dominic has said or add to it?
Yeah, thank you, Yamani and Dominic. I really like what he defined as mental wellness. Okay, to me, mental wellness is a state of well-being such that a person can be able to cope with the normal stresses of life, work productively and fruitfully, and, you know, be able to contribute to the community. So it's not barely getting rid of mental illnesses per se, as many people will think, but it's actually maintaining a wholesome approach towards a healthy mental environment. So we can evaluate mental wellness in so many ways. I won't go in depth in that, but one of the unique ways, and is one which I actually practice, is the creative manifestation. So through the creative self, for instance, are you mentally active in order to evaluate if you're mentally well? Are you open-minded? Are you creative? Are you experimental? Are you curious? Are you able to, you know, apply problem-solving strategies to social conflicts? Are you in touch with your feelings? Are you able to express appropriately negative and positive feelings? Do you believe in your competence? You know, answering such questions will be pertinent in, you know, determining mental wellness. Over to you, Yamani.
Thank you so much, Magdalene, for that perspective, honestly. And that's very true, whatever you said. Nicole, before we wrap up this introductory question, would you like to comment?
So maybe to sum up everything they've said, they're more inclined to the WHO definition of what mental health and mental wellness would constitute, which has a three-tier. First, mental wellness is a state of well-being entirely. That means that, how the rest of your body interconnects with how your mind is feeling, away from the regular stresses of life, so that it can produce an individual who is productive or helpful to the society. So those, I think, would be the three major points when you're defining what mental health is. But I'm totally in agreement with everything else I've said.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, so now we know with the recent pandemic and all, life has really changed from this side to this side. But before we go to COVID, let's talk before COVID. Let's talk about the environmental stresses. Mainly, let's focus into learning institutions and at home. Let's start with learning institutions. Before COVID, bearing in mind, let me ask the students first. Do you feel that there are certain aspects in our learning institution that might have a negative impact on one's mental health? Who would like to begin? I don't want to choose.
I could go first.
Okay, perfect.
I don't know.
Nicole? Yes, definitely.
So I'd say every institution comes with different things, and we can't only attribute it to maybe the course you're doing. Could also be where you're coming from before you get to that institution, how you get to that institution, who you surround yourself at that institution. So there's so many factors that determine whether an institution would be a mental health positive place for you. But yes, institutions do have an influence on your mental health, and it plays a major role towards how you handle yourself or what you experience.
Magdalene?
I agree with what Nicole has said. I would say that the educational institutions, okay, I'd say that these things are personal. Like mental health experience is personal, whether you are in Strathmore School or you are in JKUAT or in University of Nairobi. I think the experiences are different, and for some people, workload could be an issue that could trigger a mental illness like anxiety, while for others, they are triggered by different things. Maybe their relations with the lecturers or with the group mates, or yeah, with the school generally. Maybe for someone receiving an email after every 2 hours from Strathmore, that is just enough, to trigger the anxiety. So yeah, this is really personal.
So what I'm getting from your perspective is that triggers. Let me just highlight that word. That there's certain things in our learning institutions that trigger one's, mental well-being to be bad. Correct?
Yeah.
And from the audience, I got a suggestion, which is racism. Would any of you like to comment on that?
I think one thing we tend to forget is that in Africa especially, the idea of racism is sort of reversed, where it's more for the international student who will feel it. But to zero down onto triggers could be anything. Anything can offset a chain of events. It could even be the simple fact that a lecturer is talking and you're not understanding, which eventually leads to a panic attack. So something like racism, yes, it's a possibility. And it may happen both ways, either to the person who's of like origin in Kenya or somebody who is new to Kenya. It may happen both ways.
All right, thank you. Mr. Dominic, before COVID,
Yeah.
what is your opinion on learning institutions being a negative environment for individuals?
Well, the student for me seems to me like, in the traditional sense, there's the three stones kind of a kitchen, right? So where you have three stones and the fire right at the center. And for me, the student is the one is the fire, right? And on one side you have parents, on the other side you have colleagues at school, and on the other side you have the academic institution, the studies themselves, and the staff. Okay, so these three are key in terms of how healthy the student survives. So what is the pressure the student is receiving from home? All right, in terms of the parental expectations and the pressure to perform, because there is a strong sense of somehow I feel like the capitalistic kind of thinking has also sometimes gone into education, where as a student you are only as good as your educational results or your exam results, which can be really horrible. So you find students are aiming more towards having certificates and papers, a karatasi certificate mentality, instead of gaining competence. Okay, so competence is not the same thing as having certificates. It's different. But that pressure to gain certificates can be very, very detrimental, and so many students end up feeling horrible because for them their certificates reflect who they are, and that's not the case. Your self-worth cannot be commensurate, or it cannot be measured against exam results in any way. Okay, but so many of us are being trained to do that. That's one. So the parents, and then of course now I've mentioned a little bit of the academic progress, and this now translates into your interaction with your students, with the students themselves. Do you have friends at school? Okay, do you have people who care about you, or do you feel in a crowd but alone? So that can be detrimental, especially when you see people are dating and others are very good friends, but you don't have that. I mean, you don't have a good quality of a relationship in your life. So that can be horrible and can translate in very many other ways. Okay, so that's also very, very important, because now that translates into comparison. Where am I as compared to everybody else? And that's not a good thing as far as I can tell, because comparison really is something that sucks out all your energy and happiness, and that can result to you feeling really, really horrible about yourself. So I can say this is across most institutions as far as I can tell, and each person needs to evaluate that and see what that means for them. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I think.
No, thank you so much. It does make sense. With the community, or more so the society we live in, there's a lot of comparisons we do of ourselves with other people, and sometimes it's not for the best, and you can't change that, because that's just mindset. It's a human nature to feel, jealous sometimes, that this guy has everything, what do I have? These are triggers that happen subconsciously sometimes, so we cannot really control it at the point it happens. But let me ask you, now that we've seen that there is several factors within the learning institution, whether it be through friends, teachers, or just the academy itself, before we go to family, what can we do to create a safe haven, or what kind of solutions can we provide for such students going through such a phase? Let me start with the students again. Nicole?
So the thing about mental health is that you have to, or in order to get a solution, you have to put yourself as the person going through the issue or the problem. The first thing is you'd have to examine yourself as an individual. What are some of the things that could possibly be triggers? Let's give an example with interactions. Maybe there's a policy on interactions of students, and that will entail maybe the language you use towards each other in a classroom setup, for example, or even just the mode of teaching that is being used. We are also used to the I'll randomly pick on you and you must answer. And if you don't answer, that's it. You're not a student worthy of this class, But from the approach of, let's say, the faculty, they could put themselves in the shoes of different students and understand that some learners are highly social and other learners are very silent. So understanding the people you're dealing with would ideally be the first thing. After that, empowering those people. That means institution N, for example, will understand we have a variety of students. The students coming from these walks of life and that walks of life, then let's empower them. You know, you're able, your mental health matters, remind them, having forums just like this. Then from forums like this, getting feedback, and from that feedback, then creating other avenues, let's say peer counseling or other platforms where people can share, an anonymous platform where people can also give insight on what they're feeling. So I think it would just have to be the three, or that's in that manner, in that step, but it always has to. Thank you.
And that is very true. Sometimes we know that this particular friend circle of ours is not the best for us, but yet we push ourselves just to be part, because that's social order. If we have the popular kids, no matter what situation they may be in, they're the popular kids. If we're with them, that says something about us. And this is something we need to demolish. You know, accept who you are. If you're not outspoken, accept it. If you are outspoken, accept it. There's some things that we need to realize in life that if we're happy with, nothing or no one can stop us from prospering in life. Magdalene?
I actually like what Nicole has said. And as an addition, I think creating safe spaces in schools is really important. I like what is already in place in Strathmore. We have the mental health club where we can, you know, freely discuss issues, mental health, yeah. And we also have the Office of the Dean of Students, which actually sets up and plans meetings with international students, you know, just to find out where they are in life and in, you know, as regarding schoolwork and all that. So identifying these safe spaces, including opportunities for therapy, is really important. I believe that a student generally, or any person like joining, not only Strathmore, any university, is a person who's decided that they want to learn. You know, the fact that they are not getting the content in class, or you know, they are facing other triggers and yielding to mental illness, does not mean that they cannot be productive. So pursuing these safe spaces and you know, learning, wanting to learn, wanting to be part of a social group, wanting to engage with others is really important in, yeah, in having great mental health or being mentally well. Yeah.
Thank you so much. But before I bring Mr. Dominic, I just want to say a statement, and then I really want to, Mr. Dominic, I want to hear your opinion on it. The first step for
Sorry, I've lost you.
Or trying to recover. Oh, okay, sorry. Would you agree with me that the first step that a person should take in achieving mental wellness or mental well-being is accepting that there is a problem that needs some of the ways in which we can make our learning institutions safer for the students and teachers and staff as well?
Yeah, if I get you all, because you are breaking up a little bit, I think you are saying, you let me know if I got you properly, that the first step to resolving a problem is to accept that there is a problem. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. I actually think the first step in dealing with difficult issues in life is to first of all understand and accept that life is difficult. I don't think that's a hopeless statement. Okay, so it's a good statement to start with. But you see, the problem is not that life is difficult; it's that you are stronger than the difficulties of life. That's a good thing. Okay, so I don't believe in that approach where, you know, life is happy and all that. No, life is, there's difficult in life. Your parents will possibly die, someone you love will get sick and all that, and you'll find yourself, you know, you have a breakup, and so tough things will happen. But the good thing is you can face them. That's the beautiful thing, that you can face them and overcome them. All right, so that's one thing. And to build on what you have said, yes, if you do not understand and accept that there is a problem, it's really difficult to solve it, you know. And that's why even when you're going through a mental illness, the first thing is to understand that it's okay to be mentally ill, you know. So then after that, you're able now to adjust to that and now deal with it. So, but if you keep denying that you're not depressed, or, you know, you're not, depression is for lazy people, or mentally, you know, mental illness is for people who are weak, then there's a very good chance you're not going to deal with that. But coming to the question of how we can make education institutions more functional, uh, what Nicole and Magdalene have said is already quite sufficient. I don't know even if I want to add something more. But in Tangaza, when I was a dean of students there, one of the things that we did was to do accompaniment, that we would assign first year students to senior students who want to accompany them for the first year of their study, and also to lecturers who wanted to do that. So we would assign so that they can accompany them. And the second thing I would like to mention also to students is you need to ask yourself why seriously you are pursuing your studies, and in what mode are you doing that? Grade. Do you compare that to bargaining? Like, good question that you need to ask yourself. Are you aiming to get ition or to be competent? Because those are very two different questions. All right, so I think that's one thing I would like to mention, because someone mentioned also that, you know, that's, life is a story, a personal story. I mean, it's, you have your own exam question. You cannot copy it. You cannot copy somebody else. You've got to write your own answers in that exam question. And so be consistent about that. It's tempting, as Yamani, you have said, we cannot stop, you know, these emotions when they come at the point when you feel envious a little bit, when you have those moments of comparison. But when we are aware of them, we can stop them from controlling our behavior, and then becoming part of our belief systems and making our life miserable. I think that's what I would like to say, because and the reason I'm saying this is, you cannot change structures if you first of all don't deal with individuals. It's very tempting to say, how can we change the institution? It's very, very tempting. But if you don't change the individuals within institutions, the structures remain as they were. Okay, so that's what I would like to mention on that. Yeah, Mani?
Thank you so much. That's very true. We must start small before we can target the big institutions. So now let's move on to educational institutions and COVID. Well, not institutions, but learning and COVID. How about that? Right now, majority of us are doing online classes, sitting for online exams. What's that like? Because I feel that deep down, it's not the best environment, because one, your social interaction has reduced dramatically, because in class, you know, you're on mute, you don't interact, you just listen to the lecturer. Two, you're on bed in your pajamas, you know, you lose that sense of waking up and doing something, because, you know, you have your laptop, you have your bed, your earphones, and that's all you need for your class. I mean, I'm sure half of you don't even write notes. I could be wrong, but hey. So let me ask the students, if you're currently studying, what's that like, online classes? Do you think it has the potential to hurt individuals? Let me start with Magdalene.
Okay, this again is a subjective query. In that I think for me, as an introvert or ambivert, I'm actually thriving. You know, I love online classes. Yeah. The fact that at the comfort of my feet, I can just be able to access classes and do my assignments, just hand them in online, not having to queue at the cyber to have them printed, meet more people. Then I'll go to the office to, just deliver the assignment. For me, it has been quite a welcome, strategy of learning. But I appreciate that there are people who are struggling, they are used to meeting with lecturers, they're used to being present in class, writing notes, and denying them this opportunity might have, tampered with their mental health. So while I agree that COVID-19 has actually disrupted some of our lives, I will say that we have this opportunity to make the best. Yeah. So if, for instance, someone was used to answering, being active in class, I think they still have the opportunity. They can put their video on and unmute, and just give their opinion. Yeah. So COVID-19 has actually shown us different ways, different approaches, to learning. So yeah, over to you, Yamani.
No, thank you for that. And it is true that there are some people who are actually enjoying it, and they find it a very interesting solution to learning, because hey, technology is always progressing. I mean, who knows what will happen in the future? We'll have holograms in classrooms. And it's true that with the given pandemic, it's good to see that institutions, individuals are trying to find new solutions, trying to use their brain to 100% capacity. So it has sharing your side of the story. Before I continue, Nicole, would you like to add?
Well, for me, I guess I'm on the other end of the divide, because I'm the type of learner who will tie. Let me give an example. So I'm in law school, and remembering case law, there's so many cases you need to remember, for example. And sometimes when a teacher is discussing a concept or a case, there's a random sound, like an ambulance is passing. And I'll never forget that case, because I'll always tie it down to when the ambulance passed, it was R versus, and it was this concept. So for me at the beginning, it was honestly a struggle, especially since I did not choose. If it was something I chose to shift into distance learning, I guess it would have been easier for me. But for the first few weeks, I really struggled. I like to answer in a group a lot of the times. So when the teacher is like 1 + 1, and everybody's like 2, and you accidentally say 3, and they look at you, and you'll never forget that, because you remember how, they were like, who said 3? Then they were crickets, because nobody said 3. It couldn't have been you. Must have been somebody else. So for me, it has been, at the beginning, it was quite a challenge. But, this is life, and you have to level up. You have to shift. You have to ensure that you're continuing, because life can't stop because of circumstances. Back to you, Yamani.
Before I start asking questions, Mr. Dominic, as a lecturer, what is your take on this, online classes?
Well, I am actually lecturing 12 hours a week, and it's quite, for me, it's good, because being a TV host, I am used to speaking to a camera and all that, and it's not very difficult. But I don't think you can really exchange the whole experience of learning from physical connection, because see, learning is not just simply passing information; it's a whole relationship. And as Magdalena said, of course, being moving maybe generally towards the introversion, of course, it could be somewhere in the continuum. What people tend to use the word ambivert. She said there is a very good chance that she's enjoying that, but there is some difficulty to technology. Sometimes students who keeps getting signed out because there's blackout in their area. And no, this blackout, it could be a technological issue. but the emotional state that leaves you, that I have missed a class, that will I understand the concept that was said when I could not afford to be there. That becomes, all those things becomes, when they become cumulative, they start affecting you, and you start wondering whether, am I really learning? Am I doing something worth it? So cumulatively, they do have an effect. And sorry, I'm having a bad flu, so my voice is like a bit raspy. And then, so that's one aspect that I would like to mention. So the importance of human interaction, I find it very valuable. The final one is about, our brain has what we call selective attention, as opposed to what people like to say that, you can multitask. Unfortunately, that's a good statement people say on the street, I'm good at multitasking, but from a psychological point of view, you just can't. It's just a myth. So you can focus on many small tasks in small bursts of attention, but you cannot multitask from a serious point of view. So what happens is when you're at home and you have a computer next to you, you have a laptop next to you, you want to be cooking, someone is maybe knocking on the door, all these distractions can lower the quality of your education. Sometimes when my students forget to mute themselves, suddenly you hear they were on the phone, or they were, they were speaking to somebody, or there's a child nearby. So that all those aspects in terms of distraction can be quite, they can compete for your attention, and it's very, very difficult, especially if you're just sitting and staring at a computer for 2 hours and a half if you're doing a 3-credit course. So that could be quite tough. Yeah, that's what I would mention in regard to that. Yamani?
Sorry about that. I kind of disconnected for a bit. But it is true. There are some, in life, there are some factors that have to be there for us to just progress. So let's focus on the negative, because the whole essence is how to reach mental wellness. So in your opinion, or in your experience, at home, learning during COVID, what can an individual do to try and sustain their mental wellness? Given the fact that they're home all day, they have no reason to leave the house, and they don't have a lot of social interaction. What if we reach a second lockdown? God forbid, but what if that happens? That's going to be 2 times worse than the original one. So how would you, or what would you suggest to people so they can prep themselves for the second wave if it happens? So I'll leave it open to the 3 of you. Who would like to go first?
Nicole, as usual.
I'll take it. It's because you're a teacher and I'm always picked on. So I'd say, first of all, Pastor, this is what, if I was to give my 2 cents on this, you'd first need to assess the situation and assess your environment and assess what exactly would cause the negative side of your environment for your mental health. After you've assessed, you need to understand that I definitely cannot be composed for the next 2 weeks of this lockdown if I don't stop using Twitter, because the memes are scary now. Then you need to come up with a routine. I like routine. Routine makes life easier because you sort of, you don't have that free time to get lost in your dark clouds or in your dark thoughts. And once you come up with your routine, get people to be accountable for you, or find a way to be accountable, and get a really good support system. The beauty is that we're not stuck in the middle of a pandemic in the 1900s or somewhere when people used to talk using smoke signals. The world has become, a really small village, because you could call somebody, you could talk to strangers on the internet, and it wouldn't be like 2001 where everybody is warning you, do not talk to strangers on the internet. At this point, you can actually just have a conversation. So you just need to understand where you are, get a routine, keep your routine, and ensure that people to keep you in check. Yes.
Magdalene?
Okay, for me, bearing in mind that apart from being a student at home, I'm also a daughter. I'm also a sister, a writer, a poet, all these other things. I've realized that coming up with like a wholesome approach towards like dealing with people and dealing with my academics. Yeah, generally, like every other small project that I'm involved in, I do a few things, and one of them um, is I avoid piling up work. Like for instance, if I know that um, I'm a law student, so I have my dissertation due on the 30th of November, and yeah, it's needed by 30th of November. So I just avoid having the chapters ready, the 5 chapters ready by 28th midnight or the 29th midnight, because that will definitely trigger my anxiety. Another thing is I collaborate a lot. Despite not being present in school, I still form makeshift groups with my friends and discuss yeah, the subjects that you're currently doing. Another thing one could do is, dance around while you're doing your housework. Because, the, okay, for me especially, no one at home is excusing me from housework because I'm a student. No, I'm still doing the housework. So what do I do while I'm doing that housework? I dance around. And not only will I get like the course done, I'll also yeah, just increase the feel good hormones and just be able to do more work, accomplish more tasks, and etc. Another thing is I strive for um, my independence, which means that I'm responsible. If if I'm always available, if for instance my family sees that I'm idle or anything like that, of course they will not give me my space to do my assignments or whatever that I need to get done. So I strive. So if I've said, like for instance, I have a class at 8:15 to 11:15, I'll stay in the room from 8:15 to 11:15. They won't see me hanging around just because I'm having online classes. That means that I maintain discipline. Yeah. And lastly, learning your family members' mannerisms to avoid conflict. Yeah, this cannot be overemphasized like more than that. Yeah. If you know at for instance, for me, if my brother wakes up at 9 a.m. and the first thing he does is shout, Niamka, and maybe I have a class at 9, I'll just mute for between 9 and 9:02 so that, I just don't have to shout at him, hey, I'm unmuted, I have a class. So yeah, over to you, Yamani.
Oh, thank you for sharing that experience. But it's good. You're very observant of your environment, and that's something that we should all do. Mr. Dominic, I feel like you have a lot to say.
No, not really. I'm
No?
so totally impressed by
Okay.
what Nicole and Magdalena mentioned, especially there's something Nicole has mentioned about the importance of a schedule. It's so important, it's tough. I understand to keep a routine, and I actually prefer the word rhythm because the same thing, but routine say, so routine gives you a sense of rhythm, So I cannot, that's one thing that I picked from Nicole, and it's so important because even from an evolutionary perspective, our body has a rhythm also. That's why it is so very essential to also sleep on a schedule, like so very important. Don't shift too much your waking and sleeping hour times, and take a good amount of protein when you do wake up and some water. So that's all these are very essential. And Magdalene spoke about being aware of your environment. That's again is so key, that especially minimizing distraction as much as you can. When I'm teaching, my phone is in the sitting room and I'm in the study room, like completely different, no distraction. That is my time to do that. So that is so really so essential. And it's something else I'd like to mention. So that minimizing distraction is very, very important, by the way. If we have another lockdown, also maybe it would be good if lecturers can give more breaks. Like after every 40 minutes, you have like 5 minutes breaks before students resume again, just to stand up and stretch. That's very essential. But there is something about what Magdalene says about breaking down your goals, what you want to accomplish, you know, in terms of like, she gave an example of the paperwork, which is very, very good in itself, you know, really. If you're a procrastinator, then you need to work with deadlines, because it's very difficult to overcome procrastination, but you can work around deadlines, because procrastinators work on under pressure sometimes and they need deadlines. So create your own deadlines that you have to hit, you know, every time. So that's what I would encourage. I think most of the things have really been mentioned, but finally understand that you not always get it right. So be very patient with yourself, okay? So the ideas that Nicole and Magdalene and myself have shared with you, they're very, very essential, absolutely. But do not now start measuring yourself against that. I'm saying, oh my goodness, I'm only making 5 out of the 10 things they said. Well, good enough, you know, good enough, all right? So don't beat yourself to a pulp simply because you're not doing everything perfectly. One of the things I've been mentioning to people during this time of COVID, I know we are heading there, is lower the bar of achievement insofar as you can tell. It sounds like not a very smart advice, but difficult times, you cannot require yourself to perform in the same levels. If especially you are a person like Nicole and you like to be, you know, interact with people and get the energy from people. That's a classic extrovert. All right. Now that's not the case. So that can be difficult. So if you're demanding the same high levels, the chances that you'll get very frustrated. So you want to understand that these are difficult times, that you become a little bit more compassionate on yourself, and you understand that, well, it is what it is, you know. So that's something that you can think about. Yamani?
Oh, thank you for that. Now, let's go to another chapter within the same genre, family. Sometimes family can be a negative or an environmental stressor, depending on the circumstance. And with COVID, some of us are actually locked down with this particular family. So tell me, in your opinion, if you've experienced it, if you've heard a friend's journey, you're in a house with people who put you in that state of mind, and you're stuck there because of the lockdown. There's not much you can do. So what? That's ironic. What can you do? Let me ask Mr. Dominic first for professional advice.
I always like to listen to the experiences of people first, that I can kind of give a sort of a summary towards the end. So maybe if you don't mind, Yamani, if I can pass the back to Magdalene for this moment to start us off.
Not at all. Magdalene?
Okay, thanks. For me, I'd say I'm stuck. First of all, just to be honest, I'm stuck at home, and I've actually decided that I will employ some coping mechanisms. Yeah, and a few of those that I actually employ are having a support system, and yeah, a support system that I can actually share with, you know, when I'm having difficulties, when um, I'm triggered, for instance. Like I have my mentor, yeah, my school mentor, who I talk to like, yeah, once a week or twice, yeah, just to be in touch with myself, be in touch with my emotions, such that I'm still able to do my schoolwork, to get work done. Something else that I do is pray and just be in touch with my spiritual self. So recently, I started listening to podcasts. Yeah, I wasn't really a podcast person, and there is one that I actually listened to. It's called the Grey Zebra podcast, and it's really inspirational. So that there's times that I'm really like pissed off, you know, I'm asking my brother, you like, is it just now that you've seen this plate on this table, or do you just want to stress me, you know, or just make me mad? And at that time, I find that calming down or meditating or listening to that podcast or praying or just like speaking it out is really helpful. Lastly, I've decided to detach. I realized that you could be in a really hostile environment, but detach yourself from what's going on. What do I mean? Like, for instance, if someone is shouting at you, you could choose to take the words in and hold them dear to you and define yourself by those words. But you could also decide to, just um, what's this? Just shut it off and say, no, these words are not meant for me, or he's just mad, or just like form an excuse in your mind, and just move on. It is what it is. Yeah. So over to you, Yamani.
Well, thank you for sharing some of the ways in which you cope with the given situation. And I'm sure those are actually very practical solutions right there. And if you aren't trying this at home, you guys should. These small things that we do accumulate into something big. And in the long term, they might even help us. So Nicole, would you like to share something?
I'm sorry, I did hear you. You kind of broke off a bit. What did you just say?
Sorry, all I'm saying is, would you like to comment on the family situation? Yeah.
Okay, yes, definitely. So I'll start by telling you an interesting thing is you don't get to choose who your family is. Especially with the pandemic, you didn't get to choose who you got clustered with. Could be your blood family or people who you just refer to as your family. And your mental health starts with you. It is yours. No one else is in control of that. You're the one who is the person holding the steering wheel of your mental health. However, you need to also understand that the other four people around you, the other six, the other one person around you, is also just trying to figure themselves out amidst a pandemic. So for me, I like to create my happy place, first of all. I won't really share what my happy place is, but generally create an environment. If singing in the shower gets you to unwind from the general stresses of life, then yes, sing in the shower. If writing does that for you, if reading a book does that for you, ensure you do that. But it's also a moment when you can't be so selfish, especially with your family. You can't afford to be selfish. You need to understand, let's say arguments start at 6 a.m., wake up at 4, have your unwind session till that 6 a.m. And you'll realize it actually changes how you approach or how you take in or how you participate even in the argument, for example. So it's just a matter of creating your own space, find a way to unwind. The question here would be, what is your coping strategy, or what are your coping?
That's true. Everyone copes in their own different ways, so we must find the best way to help us cope with this time. Mr. Dominic, before I give it to you, I'd like to share a story actually in this particular field. So during the initial lockdown in March, I had a friend of mine who was in Coast, and he was stuck with a family of 5. And from that family, I can say that the only person he can actually say that he loves is his mom. Okay, because they've been together for many years. So after 2 months of the lockdown, he gives me a call, and he was a total mess. He was crying, he was all over the place. And he told me that, Burhanuddin, I know my family, but this lockdown has shown me a different side to them. Sometimes I don't blame them, but that doesn't mean I have to suffer as well. He told me he's been through a lot of negativity. The vibes he was getting from his family was not that of love, but that of hate. They were hating on his mom. They were hating on him. There were a lot of taunts. And then he was also unemployed. There was no finances coming in. So there was a lot of pressure in his mind. He told me that one day he thought to himself of ending his journey early. And that is valid because he's reached a point in his life that he doesn't know what to do but give up. But one interesting thing he told me was that as that thought processed his mind, there was only one thing that constantly popped up in his mind, and that was his mom. He told me that, Burhanuddin, if it wasn't for, if it wasn't for my mom, I would have been not here right now. She is someone I cannot leave behind. And then he said a statement that made me think. He was like, if there's one person that you hold dear in life and you're in that situation where you feel that there is nothing left, think about them. When you go, who will they have? No one. Will they be okay? I don't think so. Will they be able to survive the days to come without you? I don't think so. So he's like, Burhanuddin Yamani, my mom is the reason why I'm alive, because I have to show her a better life, and she doesn't deserve this because she's done a lot for me. And she's also suffered, but she's still breathing in front of me with a smile on her face. So it's just a story I wanted to share with you. So Mr. Dominic, you could give me your views on that.
Well, that's a sorry. That's a very good answer. That's a very good example. In fact, it's a powerful, it's a very powerful thing, actually, example. And I'm going to use it to say what I wanted actually to say. And maybe I'm just going to shift the gears a little bit towards there's this psychologist called Viktor Frankl who was imprisoned in during the Nazi Germany, and of course he suffered a lot, and a lot of his, even his own, some of his relatives were killed. And one of the statements that we use today very, very much comes from Viktor Frankl, in that one of our last freedoms that cannot be taken away is the freedom to change our attitude. Okay, so our attitude, we can always change our attitude. Now, is it easy? No, it's very, very difficult, very difficult. Okay, so these statements are easier said than done. So the first thing that I would say is, as I mentioned earlier, understand that it is a struggle. It is painful. You don't want it, so understand it and accept that that is the reality of the situation. I would rather not be here, but this is what it is. So the first thing is to accept this is a difficult situation. So Viktor Frankl talks about that capacity to, like, like change your attitude by first of all maybe accepting that. Then Viktor Frankl did something when he was in prison. People are dying. He was sure he's going to get killed. I mean, there was no reason to not believe that he's going to get killed. But Viktor Frankl did something. He always dreamt with himself teaching in the US, teaching psychology. All right? He is in prison. He does not know whether the Allies are winning the war. People are dying because of hunger and being killed by Germans. But yet in that circumstances, he held into his mind this compelling vision of what it is beyond these immediate circumstances. And for me, your friend had the mom for that. So what is your compelling vision? What is your compelling vision beyond the suffering that you're going through? So if you do not have a compelling vision beyond the immediate suffering, it's very, very difficult to find meaning in the suffering you're going through. So it's very, very essential. All right. So I would want to mention that. Number two, as much as you can, assume goodwill. If you assume your family members are being malicious, you're going to be very angry. So assume goodwill. Assume that they don't understand what they're doing. Okay. Assume that they're also suffering and they don't know how to deal with their suffering. You understand? So like when you're driving in traffic, if someone cuts you off, you have two options. All right. You can assume that these people are sons of the devil. All right. Or you can assume that maybe they were not paying attention and that's why they drove the way they did. The way you interpret that situation is going to, affect how you're going to interpret, how you're going to feel. Okay. So assume goodwill as much as you can. Maybe they were in a rush to go somewhere. You like tell yourself that. Assume goodwill as much as you can. Number three, practice forgiveness. Forgiveness is a habit. When I was doing my master's in psychology, I decided to focus on the psychology of forgiveness. It was essential for me to focus on that. And the reason I did for this, because I realized many people do not understand what forgiveness is, and because they do not understand what it is, they find it very difficult to forgive. So forgiveness essentially is letting go of the anger. It has nothing to do with forgetting, which is a really unwise and really foolish thing to tell people to forgive and forget. People don't forget that they were hurt, but you can let go of the anger and the resentment that you have. Okay, so that's something good that you can, to consider. Forgiving is not about condoning what is happening. So just because they're family members does not mean you cannot stand up and be assertive and try to remind them of boundaries. Okay, so also learn to stand up and speak, because there's a very good chance you are like, the emotional energy of telling them that they're hurting me is too much, so I'm just going to keep quiet. And that makes you more and more bitter. So learn to be a bit assertive. Stand up and say, okay, these are the boundaries. Could we respect this? And say that again and again and again, not once. Oh, I've told them 3 times, they're not listening, so I'm not going to tell them again. No, you tell them again and again, So that's very, very important to learn to assert oneself. And that has nothing, it's nothing wrong. It's not conflicting with forgiveness as far as I can tell. If it's possible, change location. If it goes to the extreme of you being suicidal, change location. There's nothing else remaining for you to lose. Okay, so you can ask yourself, where else can I go? But the other option you have is, you are saying, is being suicidal. There's nothing else you can lose. It's better even you go somewhere and find go and sleep outside the steps of a distant uncle, other than jumping off the 5th floor. So that's something that I would want to mention. And finally, prepare for it. When you're going for an interview, what do? You sit with a friend and you go through what are the possible questions that would come, so that mentally you know what's going to happen. So the same thing. Your father is going to come and say something that's going to hurt you. Prepare for it before he says it, so that when he says it, it doesn't shock you. It's going to come. He's going to behave like this. So when he says it, it doesn't really shock you because you're already prepared for it. Okay, so even athletes and basketball players, elite basketball players, do this with sports psychologists. They actually sit down with them and they rehearse the whole game, first of all, mentally. What will happen? What if someone cuts you off? And they play the whole game with sports psychologists in their mind before they go to the court itself. So that's something else that we can take from sports psychology that could help you in terms of preparing for difficult circumstances. I think I would like to, I think that's helpful for now, as far as I can tell. Yamani?
Nicole or Magdalene, would you like to comment on what Mr. Dominic has said? Anything you'd like to add?
Actually, I think he's just done the topic justice. Yeah, I've really learned a lot myself. Yeah, thank you.
I really do appreciate how he's broken it down further. And yes, I'm in agreement.
Okay, so we've talked a bit about self-development, creating a plan, understanding our environment. But let's say you're a third person, or let's say you're a person who knows your friend needs help. Now, some people generally do genuinely want to help, but they don't know how to, or what's the best approach, because you wouldn't want to do anything to spike that situation. So in your experience or in your knowledge, what advice would you give a person who wants to help his friend or family who's going through some problems? Nicole, let me start with you.
So I'd say a lot of what I experienced in terms of my own personal experience with a lot of the mental health issues were because I'm a very empathetic person. And because when you have a problem, we have a problem, I'm just that type of person. And basing this on a lot that I experienced throughout that period of my life, I'd say, for one, understand the person you're not understand the person necessarily, but have an idea of who you're dealing with. Are you dealing with the type of person who needs a crying shoulder? Or are you dealing with the type of person who needs, you've got this, a pep talk, Then understand yourself and what is the capacity that you can feel in that area. But remember to set a boundary. You need to have a at this point, when we get to this point and I cannot support you anymore, I have to sit with you and tell you, I think right now we might need to see a third party. But never position yourself in the shoes of a professional when you're not, because it's very easy. It's very easy for me to advise somebody who I've met today and tell them, yeah, just go get help. But if it's, let's say, a small brother or a cousin somewhere, I'll possibly want to hear and step into the shoes of a professional. But don't be afraid to, introduce them to someone new, get help for them. But always ensure that even as you're being there and you're giving their back, ensure that whatever they're experiencing is not going to be a trigger for you to start experiencing a negative mental health. So you have to set a boundary and always be open and converse with them. Ask them, how can I help? And if you can't, always ask for professional help.
Thank you, Nicole. Magdalene?
I actually like what Nicole has said, and I wouldn't want to add water. Yeah, but anyway, I'd like to emphasize what she said specifically on not trying to act the professional, advising and just being irrelevant in quotes. Yeah. Um, Again, it's advisable to just avail any resources you may have to that friend. If it's basically your time, just be there, listen, watch them. If they decided they want to cry for 3 hours, be there for one. It doesn't have to really be extraordinary. You don't have to provide a solution per se to the problem. You just have to be there. I think that will really mean a lot to them, especially speaking from experience. Yeah. Over to you, Yamani. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, let me ask a different question for you, Mr. Dominic. If I am someone going through problems and I realize the cause of the problem, for example, is a person, should I directly approach this person, or should I use a third party to handle this situation? What would be the ideal situation for me to get myself out of this, knowing, given that I know who the cause is?
Well, first of all, in the previous question, first of all, good answers to the lawyers. I'm really loving the very good answers that the lawyers are giving. Huh? I know you're not yet lawyers, but you are lawyers as far as I can tell. You're amazing. I think if I would just want to mention this, Yamani, if people just learned how to listen properly, we would solve a lot of mental health issues. But people really don't know how to listen, and I don't blame them. It's an art. It's an art, and it's difficult. Okay. I have I being a psychologist, I like to observe people a lot, and listen. So if you look at people conversing, you see how people hijack each other's stories. Yesterday I really was having a conflict with my parents, and they said 1, 2, 3, and then the other person hijacks that story. Yeah, even my parents, we have been fighting with my parents, and it's been really miserable. You see, what you have done, you have made the other person feel your story is not worth telling. Shut up. Okay. So you want to pay attention to that desire to respond when you're listening to somebody, and simply listen to their story. Don't listen to respond. Listen to validate what they are saying. Now, it might be so, allow me to speak French, stupid to you that you're like, I mean, if I were you, I would do 1, 2, 3, and 4, but that's not being empathetic. So the answer could be for you just within your grasp, but that does not mean it is within the grasp of everybody else. That's essential to understand. And sometimes I hear people advising like that. Me, if my boyfriend did like that, I just walk away. Yeah, that's what you would do. Okay, it's easy for you to say that. Though it's not like they're staying in the relationship to be harmed. Okay, so just be empathetic. Okay, it's very, very essential to understand that. Anyway, coming back to your question, which I'm trying to see if I still remember it. But if I do remember, you let me know. I would say this. If I don't remember it very well, you let me know. I would say this. If the person you want to stand up to can harm you physically, then go through a third party. Okay? But if you can stand up for yourself, it's very, very essential because it becomes a learning moment for you. Okay? So it is very essential to learn to stand up for yourself when it is essential to do that. That's what I would respond to that. So if you can be able to stand, but if you feel weak, then go with a third party, someone else, just maybe to stand there for moral support, as we say. But do it yourself. See, the temptation is to hand over your responsibility for living to somebody else. And that weakens you in the long run. So you want to learn to solve your own problems as much as you can and not to give that to a third party. All right, so that's very, very essential. But if you know the person can harm you, or you have tried to communicate that person repeatedly and they're not hearing, then a third person would be very, very helpful, especially if that person has a certain influence over them. Especially, let's say it's your parents and you go through an uncle who they can listen to, or maybe the parish priest or the family priest if you have one, So that could be helpful. But insofar as you can stand up for yourself, take the risk. You're going to experience a lot of fear within you, a lot of butterflies or whatever it is, a lot of terror within you, and then you act against it. And that's why we call it courage, Courage is when you act against the fear within, whereas bravery is when you act against the harm outside. So there's a lion outside there, you still go out. That's bravery. You're feeling afraid inside to face a person, tell them that they're harming you, but you still do it. That's courage. That's a good thing. So go for it, So that's what I would suggest as far as I can, if I understand your question properly. Yamani?
No, that was well answered. Thank you for that. So let me ask you, short term and long term. I know generally people would suggest see a psychologist or seek professional help, talk to a friend. Short term, in that split of the moment, what can you do? Let me change it in terms of physically. What can you do? What is something that we can do physically while seated even? Because I'm sitting right now. What can I do to just balance myself? Nicole?
I think for one, you have to, let me give a scenario. You're having a panic attack. Yeah. In this forum, Yamani called on you and you're now having a panic attack, full blown. So the first thing you'd have to do is accept that whatever is happening is happening. Then calm yourself down. Bring yourself to a level where you can try and think. If normally that doesn't happen naturally for you by breathing in and breathing out, things that calm you down. Find that thing immediately and sort of calm yourself down. Don't rush into, a lot of conflict or a lot of issues that we can never take back happen in the spur of the moment, So just ensure you take it slow, calm down. If you write about it. Then after that, gauge, do I need to ask for a third party's help? Or is it something that I can work on my own, So I think there's a lot of assessing, but the first thing you'd have to do is, call yourself for a meeting a little and just understand where you are.
Magdalene?
Again, I like what Nicole has said. And okay, for me, I realized that it's easier said than done. For instance, if I tell you, Yamani, that the first thing you should do is bow your head down in prayer, at that moment that you face that challenge, you might even forget what I told you in the first place, yeah? But I think these mechanisms, these coping mechanisms, really depend on one's mood, yeah? I'd say for me, for instance, there are times when if I'm having maybe an episode of maybe anxiety, the first thing I will do is go check out the first episode of a podcast, for instance, or pick my phone and call a friend, or maybe read a book, or maybe write something, or pray or meditate, so it varies from one person to the other. I wouldn't say that there is one right way in approaching a particular problem or identifying, or resolving a trigger. So yeah, I think it depends on your personality, on your mood at that time, on various factors. But definitely, I appreciate that there are possibly right ways to approach such an issue at that moment. But again, I found that people tend to eventually undermine what they're going through. The longer they have to sit and think, do I call a friend? Do I write? Do I, you know, um, this might pose a problem to someone experiencing a challenge at that particular hour. Yeah. Over to you, Yamani.
Mr. Dominic?
Good answers. Again, very good answers. No wonder these are mental health advocates, huh? Very good answers. One thing I would like to mention is sometimes the things that we go through in life, the mental stressors, the stressors that we have, understand that sometimes they are like sexual emotions. You feel like you're going to die if you don't do it, but you're not gonna die eventually. Okay, so that's something very essential to understand. So it's most of them you will be able to overcome by evolutionary resilience. You can overcome it, but immediate things you can do. You are intensely upset. Get out. Go for a walk. Just go for a walk. Just go out. Okay. Just have a walk. Go and unwind before you come back. All right. Other immediate things you could do is sit down and do what we call breathing exercises, where you simply sit down. You don't have, it is not meditation. You can simply sit down and count your breath to 10, 2, 3 times. Okay. Focusing on your breath. That itself is going to make you less anxious. Okay. So breathing exercises are very, very essential. All right. Then other things, of course, you can do, in the privacy of your room is journaling. And this is something that I usually say. Remember, the usefulness of the journal is not in keeping it. The therapy is in the writing process. So there are people like, I don't want to write a journal, someone might find it. Just write it. As soon as you put the last full stop, put it in the fire or whatever it is. The usefulness of the writing process is in the writing itself, not in the keeping of the journal. Okay. So then you can write it again tomorrow, whatever, even if it's the same experience, you keep writing, okay? Like you're just removing it from your mind, okay? So that's very, very essential to understand. Remember always, when you exercise, you flood your body with feel-good hormones. I heard Magdalene speaking about them, and that was fantastic. This language, this psychological language is being used properly. That's very good, feel-good hormones, So if you are facing trouble, look at your body like a tool. Prepare it for that. And one of the ways you can do is ensure that you're exercising. And that does not include necessarily going to the gym. It can be a brisk walk. You can go to on YouTube. There's so many things you can, so many exercises that are on YouTube that you can just do in the privacy of your sitting room. Okay. That's one you can do. So do some essential exercises and exercise. Sleep, sorry, sleep. It's so essential. It's very, very essential that you sleep. And as I mentioned, that you do that on a schedule. So that these are some of the things that you can do in the privacy of your room. And some of the others they've already mentioned, having the courage, one, and the humility together to ask for help. And here I want to speak specifically, especially to us men, for us men and for our salvation. We need to learn to speak. Whereas women tend to, we call it in psychology to tend and befriend, to deal with their mental illnesses. Oftentimes we men, we tend towards withdraw from people. We tend towards alcohol and substance abuse, and we tend towards anger and being harsh and violent. Okay, so we need to understand that it's okay to be vulnerable, and being vulnerable actually takes a lot of courage and bravery, so far as I can tell. So think about it. And be willing to be courageous, to be vulnerable, and to share with somebody. Yamani?
Let me just add on that. Culturally, sometimes, and I have a lot of friends who've experienced this, where all their life they've been told by family that, you know, there's no need to see a psychologist, or there's nothing like depression, it's just stress, or it's just a phase. So if you've been raised in such an environment, I'm sure it's very difficult for you to just one day wake up and say, I'm going to go visit a psychologist, who actually really want to give it pressure and family pressure. They cannot. What are some of the ways they can just try and move past it? Because it's not an easy task to do, trust me. If you go years of your life being told that there's nothing like depression or disorders, you know, it's just a phase or stress, you sleep on it, you'll be okay the next day. What do you do? Please, you should begin.
I think we lost you there for a minute. I'm not sure who is starting. Is it?
I know, Magdalene. Okay, Magdalene, go for it.
Okay, thank you. For me, I'd say just resist the need to have to convince someone that there is something like depression or there's something like anxiety. Resist the need, because you'll find that you're taxing yourself too much, and that person has already decided for themselves that they're not gonna accept this. And so of course you have now to go to the next option, which is seek um, help outside from a person who understands. I know most people think that help can only be acquired from a psychologist or from a family member or a friend or a religious figure, for instance, a priest or whatever, yeah. But you'd find that there's this quote by, I think, Paulo Coelho, yeah, if I've pronounced his name right. He says, when you truly want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve that thing, yeah. So for me, for instance, there are so many people around me who do not actually accept that there are mental illnesses like depression, and there's nothing I can do about it. Yeah. So I've found other people who can support me. I have a mentor here. I have a few friends. I have a pastor. I have, I've formed my own support system, my own makeshift support system, because most people believe that primarily your support system has to be family and friends, which is not truly the case. In all cases, yeah. So yeah, if you really want help, you'll get the help that you want. So yeah, over to you, Yamani.
Thank you, Magdalene. Nicole?
An interesting thing about human beings is that our views will always contradict. It's like the whole issue with a 6 and a 9, and somebody who's too far away to see whatever is on the ground will tell you there's actually nothing there. So it's just a matter of perspective. But the beauty about how humans are also made is that when there's something going on with you, you know. You don't have to wait to be sat down and told this is going on. There's always a gut feeling. You always know there's something that is happening. And even though you may not term it as a mental health issue and you may just say it's a general stress of life, you have to ensure that you have coping mechanisms in place. You have to ensure that you have outlets, and preferably healthy outlets. But for somebody who's at this forum and is hearing this, you may be in doubt, but don't take it in vain and not reach out. Anytime you feel like something is wrong, ensure you reach out. If you reach out to one person who has a different perspective, 7 billion people in the world, you could reach out to the next person.
You know, the bigger thing that comes up is sometimes confessing that you have a problem is very difficult, especially to your loved ones. You know, telling your family that, Mom, Dad, I have depression, I've had suicidal thoughts, I have a personality disorder. Saying this is accepting, and accepting is sometimes very difficult. So, Mr. Dominic, for someone who wants to tell their loved ones about it but cannot, what do they do?
There is something that Magdalene has mentioned, which is very essential in the sense of even when you get married one day, it's just not your parents, even when you yourself get married, there are some things maybe you would expect your husband or wife to do, and then you realize they cannot satisfy that. And you have to, without being unfaithful and without breaking the covenant of marriage, to find those, how to satisfy those needs somewhere else. You know, I'm not talking about sexual needs, by the way. So you have to find a way to look for a way to satisfy those needs. So you have to be creative. So you can have a fixed mindset and say there's nothing I can do, or you can focus. You can have a growth mindset and you say there is always, like, there can be a way. I don't know what it is yet, but I can look for it. You see, and that's what we call the cycle of learning, unlearning, and relearning, and which we are all capable of. But I can learn something, and if I find it was false, I can unlearn it, and then I can relearn new ideas. Okay, so that's a cycle that we all have to commit ourselves to. So I think one of the things that we need to start to understand is, are we willing to be willing to question our beliefs? Are we willing to be willing to question? I find some certainty people have to be really not helpful towards the search for truth. Okay, the certainty where you don't want to ask yourself, could I be wrong in how I believe? You know, when I'm helping people to make decisions in therapy, I always give them the homework to ask the question, go and ask yourself, in how many ways I'm wrong in taking this decision. So in that way, they're able to explore, and in that way to strengthen whether that decision is correct. So I think that's one thing that you can do. So how can you look for somebody else? Who is the other person that I can tell? I can go online, you know, like even, or you can go, let's say, to my website, and you can write to me. Can you say, okay, Dominic, I cannot find help right now. I cannot tell my parents because of this. And then could you help? Could you give me someone who can listen to me? Okay, these are resources that help for online. I mean, they're online, so you can be creative, get out of your way, go Google. I have found people who have come to me for therapy simply through Google without anybody in their circle knowing. They simply went and looked for a counseling psychologist in Nairobi, and then maybe my name popped up. So that, be creative. Okay, it's difficult. It's very difficult, easier said than done. But if you say, you know, I'm not gonna stop. I'm gonna use that example of Jesus. Keep knocking. You know, ask and it shall be given. Seek and you find it. Knock and it will be open. You keep doing that. You keep that process of asking, asking, seeking, knocking. It, you know, it's a philosophy of life. It's not just a Christian statement, as far as I can tell. Yamani?
Thank you. So, in short, we should never give up. If we knock on this door and fail, try again, try someone else, try something different approach, because nothing is impossible if you put 100% to it. Now, I want to change the setting a bit and let the audience get some time to interact with the guests for today. So, audience members, if you have a question, comment, or just want to say something, please raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you. And once you've talked or been answered, you put down your hand. So,
Yamani, just I'm just stepping away for 30 seconds. I'm coming back.
okay, no problem, no problem. So, audience members, would you like to comment, ask a question, give a remark, give a perspective on something we've discussed? Now's your time. And you can also put it on chat if you don't feel like talking. Actually, there's one comment, sorry, I didn't acknowledge that. In schools, colleges, or homes, how can teenagers or young adults develop certain characteristics to better themselves and develop resilience? I think what this person is trying to say is that if you're not familiar with how to cope with mental health problems or disorders, are there ways in which we can get the right information from institutions, from family, or from friends? Magdalene, Nicole, do you have any ideas?
I'd
I
say,
could go first.
okay.
But just go ahead.
So we live in a very lucky age, a very informative age, where a click of a button, a few symbols later, we have all the information we need. The harm comes in when you take the information without filtering it out properly. So I'd tell them, or I'd advise that it's okay to read far and wide. I mean, there's no harm in having information, and the harm comes in with what you do with the information. So we live in a very open age. I'll give an example with Instagram. If you search hashtag depression, or if you use the hashtag anxiety, it always pops up support. Do you need support? Like there's a pop-up that comes up like, do you need support? And if you click it, you can actually go ahead and ask questions. Equally, there are platforms like the Strathmore Mental Health Forum that is there. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to look for information, but don't only look for one type of information and rely on it. You know how sometimes we Google a symptom and then we leave it at that? No, Google a symptom, ask a professional. Don't be afraid to ask. Never be afraid to ask, and never be afraid to have the information.
Thank you. Magdalene, would you like to add on?
Yeah. Okay, for me, I've read the question, and the person is asking how they can develop assertive behavior and resilience. And okay, for me, to be honest, I've developed resilience through experience. The tough way, you know, I'm going through difficulties in life, and yeah, just being thrown off the grid for a while. But there are actually resources, yeah, in schools. There are clubs, yeah. We have, for instance, the Strathmore Mental Health Club, which organizes events, comes up with awareness forums, and such events as the ones we are having right now. Yeah, we have other clubs, yeah, other communities in school. We have mentors. Yeah, I think I mentioned before that for me, my mentor is my greatest resource in school. We have our colleagues, our other friends, yeah, our classmates, yeah. They can be great resources if they are, I would say, level-headed, yeah. Just don't go with the wave and decide who to approach. Examine the ways of life, the mannerisms, decide if these people are good for you. And yeah, they could actually be graces. Yeah. Over to you.
Thank you for that. Another question that's come in is it possible that people use their friends as a way to escape their depression? I'll pass this on to Mr. Dominic.
That's a very interesting question, yes. People can use even their mental illnesses as a crutch, unfortunately, sometimes, to explain away why they're not doing so well, you know, and to shift the responsibility. And yes, sometimes we can use friends to help them meet the needs that we have not received maybe in our family setting. So that is also very, very possible. So you grew in an environment where you never felt loved and accepted properly, and so when you are now an adult, you are really possessive and emotionally needy. Okay, so it is, and maybe people start getting tired of you, and you start interpreting also people's busyness as they don't love me, but it is because they cannot really satisfy the serious emotional need that you want them to do. And that's kind of translates also into romantic relationships. So it can happen. Oftentimes it's not malicious. It's all usually from that blind spot of that comes from coming from a situation where a certain emotional needs were not satisfied. And this is very common and among so many people, in fact, okay? So you find people who deal with that emotional neediness by acting as if they're completely sufficient and they don't need anybody. And those who are not able to do that and they become really, really emotionally dependent. Okay, so either extremes is not helpful. Yamani?
In that situation, in the short run, you can say that those particular friends fill your needs. But in the long run, what can you do to fulfill those needs? Is there alternative, or how do you permanently solve that?
Well, first of all, I will not use the word permanently, because when some of these things happen, is the first thing is to understand that you'll have them, and to be aware that they are there so that you can control how they influence you, so that you can actually act in opposition to that. Once I understand that I'm very emotionally dependent, then I can ask my question, why am I very emotionally dependent? So if you are moving from text, for example, one friendship to another not working, one romantic relationship to another not working, you have two alternatives. You can blame the world and say people don't know how to love. Or you can ask yourself, in what ways am I acting that I could be attracting people who are not helpful? Because we often tend to attract people into our lives who either are feeding into our insecurities, or have the same weaknesses as we do. And that's why they feel comfortable with us. And so I ask myself, so why am I attracting this kind of people who are possessive and domineering? Why do I get attracted to that? That's a good question. Maybe possibly because I'm insecure and I like to feel protected, and that's why I keep attracting this kind of people. That's a good point to start. So where does this come from? Maybe it came from the fact that I have a very poor relationship with my father, which is, by the way, is a very good reason. It's a very significant factor, okay? Maybe I grew up without a father. It's a very significant factor, all right? So you want to start asking those questions. And when you ask those questions, you can say, okay, now I understand this. So how do I act going forward? I can start by affirming myself a little bit more, constantly affirming myself in my conversations, in my journaling, acting in loving ways towards myself. That could be a good way to start in healing with it. Forgiving my father, forgiving my parents for not maybe showing me enough affection. You know, there's some people, when I say that, they will be like, no, I mean, my parents were busy. They were not malicious. They were just busy. Well, they were busy, but they didn't give you emotional affection. And that's so understanding that they should have given and allowing yourself to heal from that is a very good place to start. Mm-hmm. Yamani?
Thank you for that. Are there any other questions from the audience members? Please, now's your chance. Or you can even put it on chat. It doesn't have to be a question. It could be a comment, a story you want to tell, an experience. Remember, this is a safe place, free of judgment. We're here to help each other and learn from each other. And the best way is by giving it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, as people are thinking about it, as a kind of conclusion to this session, I want each panelist to just give their conclusion. It could be to this session, to the whole week if you've attended it, or a general, just a word of advice kind of thing for the audience members out there. So I'll start with Magdalene.
Kindly, I throw this to Nicole as I'm sorting out some internet issues.
Okay,
Kindly.
sorry. Nicole?
Yeah.
That's fine. So one thing I like to tell people, and I like to overly say it so that you never forget it. It's okay to not be okay. The only problem comes in when you know you're not okay and you choose not to do anything about it. But it's okay to not be okay and reach out. And you don't have to wait until there's a clinically described disease. Like, you don't have to wait until a doctor tells you that you have this disease before you reach out. Even as you reach out, remember you can reach the person you're reaching out to does not have an idea of how to help you. So it's okay to not be okay, but reach out and don't be shy. Nobody is at 100 for sure.
Thank you for that, Mr. Dominic.
Well, Nicole has just taken my statement kabisa, because it's actually what I wanted to say in terms of self-compassion, you know. So just reframe that a little bit in terms of self-compassion. You know, what's interesting is today in psychology, there is a movement away from using the word self-esteem. It is a very problematic concept, and it's not even very helpful. Of course, still many people use it because it is now almost in the mainstream. It is very focused on how you feel, how you feel, how you feel. And sometimes how we feel is not a very good predictor of who we are. Okay, so in that sense, that our self-worth, you know, our feelings move, sometimes they shift according to the experiences we are having. If you go through a breakup, of course, you're gonna feel, you're not gonna feel so good about it. If you pass your exams, you're gonna feel great. If someone is in hospital you love, you're gonna feel bad. But this fluctuation of feelings is not a measure of who you are. Okay, so the suffering that you go through, don't use them as a measure of who you are, and even the failures that you go through. So self-compassion is key. The way you speak to yourself, the inner self-talk that you have. Okay, so observe that. And when you fail in any way, whether it's in your religious practice, you know, because even religion can be a source of mental illness, even though good religion can be a good protection against mental illness. If you have deficient beliefs, especially let's say in the area of sexuality, and maybe you have been taught by somebody that sexual sins are the most, you know, the gravest sins, like for example, and so you fail, maybe you made a mistake and you watched porn, and maybe, or you had the masturbation, and now you are destroying yourself. How, you know, I'm an evil human being. Okay, so you want to be self-compassion. Understand that this is a process of standing up and failing. I don't know, maybe not all of us here are Catholics, but allow me to quote Pope Benedict, to say that holiness is not in never sinning, but it is in rising up every time we fail. That is what it is. And I think that can be a philosophy of life in all around. So, Yamani, that would be it.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Dominic. Before I throw it to Magdalene, there's a question that just popped in, and it's open to anyone to answer. Depending on the individual and their mental health status, can that determine whether medicine or therapy would be better?
Ask the question again, sorry.
Okay. Depending on the individual and their mental health status, will that be able to determine whether that individual needs medicine or therapy? And which one would be better? That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it makes good sense. I don't know if the lawyers want to give it a shot.
Feel free. I'm not choosing now.
Okay. Yes, it would determine whether they get medical, like medicine or therapy and medicine, but that's not something that you decide on your own. Many times it's advisable that you get a professional to guide you, because that's their area of specialty. For you, you may say, I don't want medicine because I don't want to be stigmatized as a person who takes pills to calm down, you know. But you need a professional to guide you on which one would be better depending on where you are. And normally what happens when you go to a professional is they sort of help you break down and understand where is this coming from and why and to what extent you have reached. So yes, over to the professional.
I don't know if the lawyer, you know, I am very impressed, by the way, Nicole, by your response, because that's a very professional from a psychological point of view, is a very good answer. It's a very, very good answer. So antidepressants are not. I could hear myself 1,000 times. That was cool. Okay.
Yeah. So you're good though. You're good now.
Good. So I was saying, so antidepressants are not given over the counter, and the answer that Nicole gave is a very good one. So in those circumstances where, so there are people who cannot, are not responsive to therapy conversations, in terms of having conversations. So what they need to do is they need to be given some antidepressant. But there's nothing wrong with them, by the way. There's nothing that shows that I'm going crazy. That's why I'm taking this. No. It's a very, very normal process. Just like the way you take medication for malaria or amoeba or whatever it is, typhoid, whatever it is that you have. It's a very, very normal process. So you can be given antidepressants. But so the antidepressants can only come from a referral. Okay, so if you come to me, I'll refer you to a clinical psychologist and then or a psychiatrist. Oftentimes a psychiatrist, because a psychiatrist is one who gives medication. In some circumstances, there are clinical psychologists who are authorized because they're clinicians to give medication. All right, so that can happen. Good. I don't know if Yamani is still around.
Yes, I'm around. So, Magdalene, you have your conclusion pending. So, the floor is yours.
Sorry, I'm actually experiencing internet problems, but okay. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Yeah, so mine is just to say, okay, I'll just leave you with two quotes that I found and that were really interesting. And one of them is, what mental health needs is more sunshine, more candor, more unashamed conversation. And this was done by Glenn Close. And it made me think of the stigma surrounding mental health. I mean, more people are becoming more aware of it, but yet they do not want to be part of the conversation. There are less people coming out and saying, yes, I have depression, yes, I have anxiety, yes, I have bipolar disorder, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. Yeah. The second quote that I found by Fred Rogers was, anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that's mentionable can be more manageable. When we can talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less scary, and less upsetting. Um, and that's exactly what we are doing right now. Yeah, we are talking, we are raising awareness, and that's what is important in the end, because I know for a fact that the more people are ready to share their experiences, the more they are able to feel they belong, the more they are able to be productive in school, in the workplaces, in all these different environments. The more they are able to be in touch with the surroundings, the more they are able to just be human. Yeah. And so I've really enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing all of us promoting this noble agenda. Yeah. Over to you, Yamani. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And if there are no further questions, maybe I'll be allowed to close today's session, if that's okay. Any objections, please raise your hand. So Dominic, would you like something to add? All right.
I'm good.
Okay, so basically, I hope the audience members were able to learn from our three panelists, because I sure have. And I just want to put it out there that you're not alone, and there are tools at your disposal, whether it's through a friend, through an institution, through a club even. Just take the effort to give it a try. And who knows, it might help you at the end. And before I actually close, the panelists, would you mind sharing details, personal details for our audience members to reach out if they ever need to? Mr. Dominic, do you have website, email, something that could help us?
Yeah. Maybe someone can help type this for me. kamaumwangi.co.ke. I think Yamani, you also have access to my website.
Yes.
So if you can just paste the link on the chat section. So if you go to that site, you will find a place where there's some materials that you can read. One, and at the same time, if you'd like to book a session, you can book a session using the form that is there. And there is even a number there. If you want to, you can text. And if in case you need assistance, you can either talk to me or I can find someone else to talk to you. Okay, so feel free to do that. So that would be very, very helpful. And if you also would like to write articles for my page, for my website, you're welcome. I can post them there, in one of the sections and put your links there if you want to help some other people. That is also quite okay. Great.
Before I continue, I've just been given a private message and I feel it's something I should bring out. So an individual a few years ago was in an incident that has really traumatized them. And this incident involves physical force, more so being sexually assaulted. And this person hasn't gotten over it up to date. So as a professional, Mr. Dominic, what advice can you give this person right now to kind of help them through this rough patch?
First of all, I would like to say to that person, my deepest apologies, my deepest sympathies for the experience that you've gone through. It's a very, very unfortunate and very rough experience that you went through. It's very unjust and very unfair. And that the struggle that you're experiencing has nothing to do with you being lazy or not facing it. It's because it's a very, very difficult experience. Okay, so I want you to understand that. I want you to understand that all of us here right now are communicating our love and our closeness and our kindness and giving you hugs of concern and goodness and warmth. Okay, so we care about you right now and we are sending you the vibes of healing. At the same time, I would request you, as far as you can, talk to me, okay? Talk to a professional. If you'd like to speak to somebody, if you'd like to have a female therapist, let me know. You can go to that website. That website, there is a number. That number comes to me directly. And I'll keep that confidential as I do with all my other clients. And please get in touch with me. You can get over this, you can heal, and you can thrive. And let me tell you something. By healing from it, you are overpowering the person who took advantage of you or the people who took advantage of you. These people are still harming you by the fact that you are still suffering from it. By being courageous to heal from it, you are taking that power from them and you are regaining your power and your right to be happy. So please do get in touch and know that we care about you. Thank you. Yamani?
Are you okay, Mr. Dominic?
Yeah, I'm all right. I'm all right.
And I just want to acknowledge that a few additional details have been put to the chat. It has Mrs. Florence and Lucy, and there's also the details of the mental health club. So if you need to talk, please write these contacts down. You also have Mr. Dominic's. So please reach out to us for us to, sorry, my video is off, so that we can have a more personal interaction. And Magdalene, Nicole, would you like to share your your website so people can read your beautiful articles?
Let me go first. Sorry, because I'm having internet issues. Let me just go first before I go off. Um, as I said before, I'm a writer, so I have a blog. I think I'll post the link on the chat. You can also find me on Instagram at w.mohio, or send me an email at magdalenemohio@gmail.com. I think I'll post all that on the chat. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That would be lovely. And Nicole, will you do the same?
I'll post on to the chat equally, but you could always find me on my socials at Nyona or Nicole Nyona, depending on the social media platform you're looking for me on. And I'm a DM away. You would like to talk, I'll definitely help you find platforms. I'm not offering professional help, but I'm offering to be a friend who will listen to what you have. And if you need to, we'll definitely find a way for you to get help. Also, in reference to the previous person who had DM'd you, or sorry, personal messaged you, I just like to say this to you: you have taken the first step. You have talked about it, and that is the first step to healing. You know what is going on. You know how it's making you feel, and you're going to be okay. Sending a lot of love and hugs your way. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you so much for reaching out to me. It is really brave of you, and we're all there to support you. And I really just know that we're here for you and you're not alone in this journey. So I think that is it from our side. So closing remarks from me. First off, I would like to thank the Strathmore Mental Health Club for organizing this week's session. They've put a lot of time and effort into planning and organizing this. So thank you so much. It was a privilege to be a host on one of the sessions. And oh, sorry, I see a hand. Judy?
Yeah. So I'm Judy, and I do have a question that I would like to ask. Sorry, I was trying to put my words together to see how I'm going to phrase this correctly. So forgive me if you don't understand the question. Please let me explain it further. My question would be to Mr. Dominic. When you talked and you said about people answering the question from Yamani about confronting the people that you think in your life are not doing good to you mental-wise development, I would say. How does walking away damage you personally? Like if you opt to walk away instead of confronting them, does that damage somebody psychologically?
Thank you for that question. I'm sorry, I'm really struggling right now too in terms of if to speak, but that's okay.
Yeah.
This is what I would say. Well, first of all, two things. If there are people who are in your life and there's nothing you can do other than stand up to them, then you might want to do that. But if you can walk away, there is no harm to it. And the problem if it becomes a habit, okay? So that whenever you are faced with a problem, you walk away. I find this with people who are, I can't wait to leave my family because there are people who are making me irritated, so I want to walk away. But the problem is this becomes a pattern. So you kind of teach your mind when you have problems, we walk away, we run. Okay, so now you leave your family, you go, it's now your colleagues. You walk away from the, it's a relationship, you walk away, it's a job, you walk away. So you have this pattern of walking away. So it's very, very essential, if you can, to stand up. Even if you're going to walk away eventually, it's very, very important to say, when I'm taking people through the process of forgiveness, one of the stages is to confront the person who offended you. And confronting is not having a fight. is being assertive. And when you're being assertive, what you do is you focus on the behavior. You don't focus on the individual. You say, when you call me this name, I feel horrible about it. And I would like you to stop doing that. Okay? So you focus on the behavior at hand, but you say it. They might not listen, they might not pay attention, but you say it. So back to your question, yes, you can walk away. And many instances you might have to walk away because maybe the person is completely inconsiderate, they have no sense of conversation, they cannot listen. So if you have the opportunity of walking away, take it, go, okay? But don't let it be a way of dealing with problems every time that people take advantage of you, you walk away. And here I would like to speak to women specifically, because from psychological perspective, by nature, the women by nature tend to score higher in terms of depression and anxiety. You tend to score high in terms of depression and anxiety. And at the same time, when it comes to a concept of called agreeableness, women generally tend to wallow in conflict instead of standing up for themselves. They just decide, I'll just suffer quietly inside and hope it will go away, the maternal instinct. And that is not very helpful in the long run. So you have to be willing to face conflict, because at the end of the day, it becomes helpful to you. All right. So that's what I would say briefly, so that I don't lengthen it so much. But again, if you want to speak to me, feel free to do so.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's close it up very closely to what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Perfect. You're welcome.
Thank you, Judy, for asking that question. So with that, again, a big thank you to the Mental Health Club for organizing this week and taking the time and effort, bearing in mind COVID and everything, to making this week an amazing journey for all of us. Secondly, panelists, Mr. Dominic, Nicole, and Magdalene, thank you for taking the time to join us and give us your knowledge, your experience, your wisdom to all of us, because I definitely have learned a few things from you all, and I'm sure the audience members have too. So thank you so much. We would really like to hear more from you in the future, and please keep in touch with us through the club, of course. And lastly, audience members, those who joined previous sessions and those who joined today, thank you for joining. And it really says something that people are interested in mental health. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope I did justice to today's session. I hope you all learned something, one thing or the other from today's session. And to end it, just remember one thing. You're not alone, but it starts with you. With your first initial push, trust me, you'll get there. So never give up, keep on fighting. And yeah, have an amazing evening. Have a lovely weekend ahead, and please be safe. Please abide to COVID measures because we know cases are increasing. All the best for those sitting for exams, studying, for those working, be safe. Mr. Dominic, thank you so much. It was truly a privilege to meet you. Of course, Nicole and Magdalene, to you too. And yeah, with that, I say goodbye.
Tschüss.